Hello there, it is me, and I've got two great conversations. I think they're pretty good for you today. I've got Jared Yates Sexton, who I went live with yesterday at noon on YouTube. Some of you were there and saw most or all of it. And I've also got another conversation I had live, but I was the guest on Brian Shapiro's YouTube show again. And, you know, I think it was so good that I'm going to share it with you here because I really knocked it out of the park talking about gun violence in America. I'm sometimes a pretty good guest. I really don't rant and rave too much here on the show when I'm alone. But if I'm a guest on somebody else's and they've invited me, I'll let it rip. And I thought I was pretty articulate, so I'm going to share that with you as well. Coming up, my conversations with Jared Yates Sexton and Brian Shapiro. I think you're going to like them. They begin at 31 minutes, and then my conversation with Jared starts at 57 minutes if you want to skip ahead to either of those. First, I've got your headlines and clips, and before that, it's the good stuff. Hope, humor, and inspiration for you to get your day started. And I got a lot of that last night because I hosted a hangout, the Monday night hangout, and there were over 50 people there. We had a great 2 hours, and I forgot to record it. That's right, I just didn't hit record. So I always record these for all kinds of reasons, obviously, but specifically so that you can watch or listen to them the next day if you missed the hangout. But I didn't hit record. I'm sorry about that. I'll see you on Thursday. I'll record that one. But we had a great time. It was a fun, interesting conversation where we covered quite a bit and heard from a lot of people. If you haven't joined our Hangouts, you ought to. You should become a paid subscriber, patreon.com/PeteDominic, and join the Hangouts, join the community, and hope to see you Thursday at 8. Okay, well, what have I got for you now? I just want to thank everybody who listened to yesterday's show where I welcomed the ladies of the Hue, Kimberly, Frances, Karen, Vicky. It was great. The reviews are still coming in because people listen to podcasts at all different times, and then they reach out to you, and I just absolutely love to hear from you. Our friend Kim Nyborg up in Iowa shared this on Blue Sky. These 4 women are my 4 favorite guests Pete ever has. Strong, smart, funny, confident, nuanced women that I look up to. If you've been looking for a day to start listening to stand up, today is your day. Thank you, Kimberly, for that advertisement and those kind words. I'm sure the ladies appreciate them. Also, I don't know what it is about Iowa, but I also heard from Mark Nolte up in Iowa yesterday, who just simply texted me, "The Hue makes me smile." Aw, it's a sweetheart, Mark. And John Carroll, who was hanging out with us last night, really great to see him, texted me on my way back from Christmas shows in D.C., and I gotta say it was an outstanding episode of The Hue, my faves. Hope to see yous tonight, and we did. John was there, and he was awesome, as always, and it was great to see him. So I appreciate all of your feedback. Keep it coming. standupwithpete@gmail.com is my email. Moving on to other things that are good and inspiring and hopeful. You know, everybody today is a life coach, a motivator who can tell you, you can do anything and all of that. And I'm for it. I'm for positive thinking, but I'm not for over-promising. I'm not for generalizing. And I really don't trust some of these folks who are kind of life coach, social media life coach creators. So I'm wary of them, and I'm going to be talking to somebody who kind of debunks or is critical of a lot of these people coming up in next week, I believe. But that being said, I do like a lot of what they have to say. You know, you can't practice all of what you even preach yourself, much less what you see other people saying online, but still worth playing some of it and trying to remind yourself of who you want to try to be, which is why I like this guy and don't even know his name. And think his presentation is a little weird, but still, I'm going to share it with you because it worked for me yesterday, so maybe it'll be motivating to you.
Here comes 10 things happy people spend 0 time worrying about. Holding grudges. They're actually kind of heavy. That's where the term chip on the shoulder comes from. Let them go and lighten the load. Comparing yourself to others. It's a waste of time because no one is the unique blend that you are. Instead, work on discovering and enhancing your unique blend that will bring your gifts to the world. Worrying about the future. The future is actually an illusion. The past is now delusion. So just focus on the here and now. Perfectionism. It's one of the greatest causes of depression. Negative self-talk. Listen to what you're saying to yourself and make sure it's positive. You are your own best friend or worst enemy. Definitely become the friend. Dwelling on past mistakes. Instead of dwelling on them, just learn the lesson and then grow and move on. The need to please everyone. People-pleasing will get you nowhere except a lot of phony relationships. Fear of change. Fear is often a sign, actually, to go forward, especially if it's just our own limiting beliefs that are holding us back. So yeah, don't let fear ever stop you. Regret. Regret is also another emotional waste of time. You want to simply learn the lesson, not sit there regretting, which will just inject cortisol. That's the hormone of stress throughout your body. And finally, happy people don't worry about what other people think of them. They worry about what they think of themselves. So make sure what you're doing in your private and public life is something you're happy about, proud about. Then it really doesn't matter what other people think.
All right, I'll try all of that. I don't even believe that guy, whoever he is, believes all of those things or practices them necessarily. And I say that only because of the way that he said them. I just didn't love his inflection, but I did love the words and the sentiment of what he was saying. So I thought that would be a helpful way to start your day here on The Good Stuff. And wherever you are, however you are, and listening to my voice right now, I hope that if you're not in a good place, and even worse, if you're in a dark place right now, and it feels like you're buried, maybe you're not. Maybe you've just been planted. I heard that line when I was looking up some things for The Good Stuff. If you feel like you've been buried, maybe you've just been planted. It's that idea, I like it, that the lotus flower starts in the mud and it grows into something beautiful. So if you are in a dark place or a tough place, maybe you're not buried, you've just been planted is a good idea. I like that one. Wanted to share that with you as well. All right, well, I don't have a lot more for today's episode of The Good Stuff because yesterday was a very busy day and I just didn't get all I wanted to done for today's show. But I do have two great conversations coming up and the news, so let's get to that right now. Here are your headlines for Tuesday, the 17th of December. Police have identified the shooter at a Wisconsin Christian school, and I won't say her name, but the fact that it's a young woman is really terrible. A 15-year-old girl who later died from what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. A teacher and a teenage student were also killed. 5 students and another teacher were injured. The shooter was found with a gunshot wound inside the school, and police officers arrived, pronounced dead soon after. Police have yet to describe a motive and said investigators are still trying to figure out more information. And it's crazy because, as the New York Times puts it, young women are much less likely to be suspects in school shootings. This year, according to the K-12 school shooting database, 9 shooting suspects were female compared to 249 who were male when gender was identified. The school apparently has served as kind of a refuge for children who'd been bullied or struggled at other schools because the staff were quick to put a stop to cruelty, apparently. So, yeah, it's terrible, terrible situation there, and I'm sure we'll learn more in the details to come. I'm surprised that there's been that many school shootings that I didn't necessarily know or talk about. It depends on how they're classified, much less that 9 of the suspects were female. I haven't heard of any of them. So I pay real close attention to the news. I feel like I want to go back and look to find out more about those 9 women because it's such a rare thing. I'll have more on the shooting in my conversation with Brian Shapiro, more reaction to it. That's coming up. Devastation off the coast of Southeast Africa, 500 miles to be specific, is where you can find the French Indian Ocean territory called Mayotte. A cyclone came through there and killed potentially hundreds, if not more people, leaving swaths of the population cut off. We now have, as I stay overseas, political uncertainty in Berlin. The Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, lost a vote of no confidence yesterday, paving the way for early elections in February, ending a turbulent year at the polls for several of Europe's leaders and governing parties. The headlines are Scholz loses confidence vote, paving way for elections. Government collapses at perilous time for Europe, and, quote, low point in history of modern Germany. Wow. Now let's head to South Korea, where the president there has not yet responded to a summons for questioning over his failed attempt to declare martial law. The president has been asked to appear for questioning on Sunday as part of an investigation by the prosecutor's office. But, he said he's still forming his legal defense team. According to reporters there, prosecutors plan to issue another summons on Monday. Will you come to court today, sir? Maybe he'll show up today. And speaking of political uncertainty, now it's in Canada. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is now on the brink of resigning as his Liberal government crumbles around him, according to CTV News. Trudeau is considering his options as a leader. Sources have told the CBC his finance minister, my old friend, really, I used to be on TV with her. She used to come on the old show. Now she's the finance minister, was foreign minister at one point. Chrystia Freeland, she announced yesterday that she is going to quit after clashing with Trudeau on issues including how to handle possible U.S. tariffs, dealing a huge blow to an already unpopular government. And let's put this one under the heading of difficult diplomacy. The United States and China renewed but narrowed a long-running science and technology agreement last Friday, marking continuity in their ties while also accounting for bilateral tensions that are only likely to grow under the incoming Trump 2 administration, which we'll have to see what happens with our relationship with China. That should be fascinating every hour of every day. And now let's come home to domestic news. Of course, one of the big stories remains ABC agreeing to a settlement with Donald Trump for $15 million. More on that coming up. The deadline for a government shutdown is now Friday. Congressional leaders are still trading offers as recently as yesterday on a government funding patch attached to a disaster aid package and a slew of other priorities leaders hope to clear before the year's end. So we've got that potential to look forward to this week. Yesterday, Trump held his first news conference as president-elect. He invited reporters to his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida for his first news conference since the election. He spent nearly half an hour just jumping from one topic to another, including border security, tax cuts, and the war in Ukraine, before finally taking questions. The event, New York Times writes, in many ways was reminiscent of Trump's first term when he relished seizing the world's attention. Trump said Ukraine should be ready to make a deal, cited debunked data linking vaccines and autism, threatened more lawsuits against media companies, and accused the Biden administration of hiding the truth about recent drone sightings. Fucking idiot. He also said he would consider pardoning Eric Adams, who's the mayor of New York City. He claimed Elon Musk would be able to cut $2 trillion from the federal deficit with, quote, no impact on people, which is absurd and unrealistic. And, what could we say at this point? He also announced that SoftBank, the Japanese tech investment giant, plans to inject $100 billion into American projects, likely to be focused on the infrastructure needed to support the AI boom. That's a pretty interesting development. And finally, at one point, Trump suggested that he was being treated better than last time he was elected. He said, the first term everybody was fighting me, but in this term everybody wants to be my friend. I don't know. My personality changed or something. Yeah, I don't know what it could be. I don't know what it could possibly be. But that is the recap from yesterday, and I hope it's better to just kind of read about it rather than playing clips about it. Also in Trump-related news, New York Supreme Court Justice Juan Merchan ruled that Trump's conviction back in May for falsifying business records in the hush money case, the first time a former U.S. president has ever been found guilty of a crime, well, he decided that ruling should not be overturned in light of the U.S. Supreme Court case that basically said presidents can do whatever they want. Juan Merchan said, well, not this. This is not covered by official business of the president and the immunity doctrine that the Supreme Court decided. Juan Merchan has decided separately whether to issue a sentence before Trump is in office, after his term, or never. So, also, RFK Jr., the crazy conspiracy theorist and sick, narcissistic sociopath, in my opinion, his choice for health secretary, that's who it is. He yesterday was on Capitol Hill meeting with senators to make his case for a spot in Trump's cabinet. Please, Lord, no. Syria's new leader called for sanctions to be lifted. TikTok asked the Supreme Court to block a law that would effectively ban it in the U.S. The co-founder of the now-defunct company Ozy Media received a nearly 10-year prison sentence for trying to defraud investors and lenders. His name is Carlos Watson. Black student enrollment at Harvard Law dropped by more than half under the heading of education. That's a pretty disconcerting headline. A Senate committee found yesterday that senior executives at Amazon disregarded internal warnings about injuries tied to strict production quotas. And apparently veterans are going abroad to get treatment for injuries and through psychedelics that are illegal in the U.S. Thought that was an interesting headline. ProPublica has dropped a damning expose on leaked United Healthcare report about limiting child healthcare services to cut costs, which is a must-read. And those are your headlines for yesterday. Now let's get to your news clips, which I'm going to start with this song. I'm going to play a song for you, which is related to the news. It could have been part of the good stuff, and many of you might have already seen it. But this guy, Jesse Wells, writes songs about things that are happening like right now in the news, and he's clearly got a leftist ideology on things, I think it's fair to say. But his newly released acoustic protest song about the healthcare insurance industry is called United Health, has gone viral just weeks after the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson's. And I'm going to play it for you right now. Here it is, Jesse Wells.
There's an office and a building and a person and a chair, and you paid for it all, though you may be unaware. You paid for the paper, you paid for the phone, you paid for everything they need to deny you what you're owed. There ain't no you in United Health, there ain't no me in the company, there ain't no us in the private trust. There's hardly humans in humanity. Now the procedure that you're needing ain't the cost-effective route, and only 2% of people end up winning a dispute. So if you get sick, pray to God for help, cause your doctor's gotta pray through United Health. Way back in 77, Mr. Richard T. Burke started buying HMOs, putting federal grants to work, made 50 billion buckaroos. Last year the Warren Buffett of health, the Jeff Bezos of fear. Now CEOs come and go, and one just went. The ingredient you got, bake the cake you get. But if you get sick, cross your fingers for luck, cause old Richard T. Burke ain't giving a fuck. Commoditized health, monopolized fraud. Here's the doctors we own and the research we bought. They own the pharmacies and a lot of the meds. They should start buying graves to sell us when we're all dead. There ain't no you in United Health, there ain't no me in the company, there ain't no us in the private trust. There's hardly humans in humanity. There's hardly humans in humanity.
Yeah, I love that. Only humans and humanity. I liked it a lot. That was really good. I can see why people love that guy so much, why he's so talented. I'll put him up against our Gareth Sever and our legendary John Carroll and so many of the other musicians that we have writing similar types of songs as well. But that was great. Not that it's a competition, but I really like that. Jesse Wells is his name. All right, now I want to play for you this 5-minute conversation from CNN yesterday, because I want to put a lot of emphasis on this deal, this settlement that ABC News made with Trump. We had a great conversation about it at the Hangout last night, Kevin Richberg and others weighing in on it. But I just thought this is an important and interesting conversation that took place between two guys. Not my favorites necessarily. I know both of them. I don't have anything against either of them. I don't love Brian Stelter's voice or his personality that much. But often I do like his analysis, and Jim Acosta as well. I thought they did a pretty good job talking about ABC, their competitor in television news. Here it is right now.
ABC News will pay millions of dollars to settle a defamation suit with Donald Trump. It all stems from George Stephanopoulos using the word rape instead of sexual abuse in an interview with about E. Jean Carroll's lawsuit against Trump, in which that was discussed. Under the terms of the settlement, the network will issue a public apology, pay $1 million for Trump's attorney's fees, and pony up $15 million for a, quote, presidential foundation and museum. CNN's Brian Stelter joins me now. Brian, this is pretty unusual and disturbing. What do you make of all this and this ugly legal fight that is trying to be avoided by ABC and Disney?
Right. Trump has a long history of filing lawsuits, including against news outlets. Most of the time, those cases get thrown out. Judges see right through those frivolous cases and throw them out. Trump right now has litigation pending against CBS, for example, over a 60 Minutes interview of Kamala Harris. So these cases oftentimes do not work out for Trump. But this ABC case is a major victory. I talked to renowned First Amendment lawyer Floyd Abrams last night. He said, look, there's no way to say other than this is a big win for Trump. It's going to embolden him to file more of these suits. But as Abrams said, he called it disturbing that this could turn $15 million could be paid around the use of the word rape versus sexual abuse in that interview on ABC's This Week. Look, Stephanopoulos has been a Trump target for a long time. He was very aggressive in this interview that aired in March. So Trump decided to file a suit about a week later, and a judge did not throw it out. A judge let it go forward through the discovery process. So it's possible that ABC decided to settle this, Jim, because there might have been embarrassing emails or text messages on ABC's servers that were going to become public. Everybody remembers that's what happened to Fox News when Dominion sued Fox. So this might have been a case where ABC is avoiding public embarrassment by paying $15 million. But look, there's a lot of people that say that payment is embarrassing as well. So this is not the end of the story.
Well, and there are a lot of different ways to talk about this, Brian. I mean, Donald Trump has said a lot of things about people, places, you name it, that have been false and so on. And it just strikes me as a bit rich that, he's going to be the recipient, or his presidential foundation is going to be a recipient of this kind of large settlement. And I have to ask you whether or not you think there's just going to be a chilling effect on the news industry just as he is coming into office because of this. I mean, I suppose it's almost a rhetorical question because the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. Media lawyers are worried about this. They're preparing for it. They are preparing their newsrooms for it with the expectation of more lawsuits, more leak investigations, more subpoenas in the months and years to come. There's a great AP story about this morning saying there's a balancing act right now for the press between being fearful and just being prepared, doing our jobs, but being aware of the climate. And maybe that's partly what ABC was doing here. ABC, as a source there, said to me, we needed this problem to go away. They were trying to explain the payment that way. But now, as you said, $15 million for Trump's future museum. I imagine there will be an ABC News Hall of Fake News. There will be some attempt to troll as a result of this. And more seriously, we are in a climate where more of this kind of litigation is expected. And of course, it's not just Trump suing news outlets. Trump himself is facing multiple defamation lawsuits. So, this turns in multiple directions, right? And what some see as accountability for mistakes on live television, others see as currying favor, a settlement to curry favor with the next president.
Yeah, and I just wonder, Brian, what this is going to mean for news organizations, for tech companies. We're going to talk about the implications for tech companies in a moment. But it seems to me that there's a lot of this bending the knee going on, and I'm sure the folks over at ABC will say that that's just not the case. But I just feel, and I wonder how you feel about that aspect of all of this. I mean, to me, it seems this is a time for our industry to stand firm. And we're going to have a very important job to do. And that's not putting us on a pedestal or anything like that, but we're going to have a very important job to do because Trump is not going to change his ways when he gets back in the Oval Office. He's going to continue to say things that need to be fact-checked. And you can't have the news industry worrying about this sort of stuff when they're just simply doing their jobs.
Well, if some bend the knee, others have to stand up straighter. The former Time magazine editor Richard Segall said this morning, Trump has sued dozens of publications and media outlets in the past, trying to, quote, intimidate the press into self-censorship, not to actually win any particular case. He did win in this case with a big payment, but that broader concern about self-censorship is one that I know many viewers and readers are worried about. And ultimately, Jim, as you know, we work for them. We work for the viewers, not for anybody else.
Yeah, there you go. Well, there it is. And I think that's important. We'll continue, obviously, to talk about it and focus on and keep track of those who haven't capitulated to the future administration before it even starts. All right. So I wanted to share that with you. Also wanted to play this. This is triggering and upsetting. Just want to give you a warning here, but this is a new Republican congressman who, in a speech yesterday, basically Well, he told the audience we need a lot more Daniel Pennies because there are far too many Jordan Neelys in this country. This is Congressman-elect Brandon Gill. That's where he's from. Tejas, Texas. Yes. Sorry, Texans. Sorry, Tina. Here he is opening his remarks at the New York Young Republican Club annual gala. And at the very end, he says a line that he's hoping to get a huge applause on, but it doesn't sound like he did. And he took a long pause. And, well, it was awkward. Here it is. Asshole of the week, Brandon Gill.
It's great to be here all the way from North Texas. There we go, in the home in New York of the great patriot Daniel Penny. I don't know about y'all, but I think we need a lot more Daniel Pennies in this country. Because we have far too many Jordan Neelys. Thank you guys for having us here.
Yeah, it was a long, awkward pause right there. And that guy sucks. But you know who doesn't? This kid. I don't know who sent me this, but I like it a lot. This is just some dude making a TikTok in his car. But you know me with the school board stuff, I think so much of it starts there. And I've been very active, obviously, in our local school board campaigns and elections as a result of the fascists taking over, wanting to take over. Someone's got to stand in their way. And I just love this rant. I thought it was really good, and I wanted to share it with you.
What radicalized you? I'll fucking tell you what radicalized me. When I was in 8th grade, my dad came home from a miserable, terrible, grueling day at work and said, hey, put your shoes on, we have to go to the school board meeting. Now, I'd never been to a school board meeting, didn't even really know what they were for, but what I did know is that my school had just implemented a policy that anyone could get a free lunch at school regardless of financial status. Rich kid gets a free lunch, poor kid gets a free lunch, paid for by the taxpayer. Now, 8th grade me thought that was a real fucking good deal. I still think that. And I thought then that anybody with a rational fucking brain cell would think the same. But we got to that school board meeting, and I watched as the same people that I saw at Sunday church every Sunday stood up in front of the board and talked about how this was a terrible thing and that they were all shelling out for all these people that didn't need a free lunch. And then I watched as my dad, the strongest, hardest working man I've ever known in my entire life, I mean, he could bend a horseshoe in half with his bare fucking hands. My dad stood up and said, hey, I know exactly what it feels like to be the kid that needs the free lunch. I grew up on free lunch. And I also know exactly what it feels like to feel the stigma behind that in your classmates. He said, if you have a problem with paying for these free lunches, you can bill me. And then he looked at the school board and said, thank you for your time, and we left. Now, 8th grade me thought, well, maybe it's just a problem in my slack-jawed yokel of a hometown. But the more I've grown up, the more I've seen that this is not just a problem in 2,000 people towns. It's a problem nationwide, and that the same people that are having these problems are the same people that are at church every fucking Sunday. That's what radicalized me.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm not giving that kid any attribution. I couldn't find it, but I thought that was a good rant, so I wanted to include that in the audio clips for you. But now it's time to get to some jokes, and they are brought to us by CBS Late Show and my old boss, Stephen Colbert, talking about all these drone sightings. Thought this was pretty good, so let's do it. Go to the Late Show.
Follow me down the rabbit hole because the rabbit flew a drone down there. When last we met, these ominous sky visitors were being reported all over New Jersey. But since then, the drones have done what everyone in Jersey does, go somewhere else. Because as of today, the drone armada has also been spotted in New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Ohio, which can mean only one thing. The drones are visiting colleges. Remember, drones, don't worry about going to the best school. Go to the school where you can be your best self. With so many unrelated drone sightings, Americans have reasonable questions. Where are they coming from? What are they doing up there? And will they interfere with the chemtrails that are turning our livestock bi-curious? Now, both the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security have said that there's nothing to worry about, especially because some of the reported drone sightings turn out to be non-drones. Take the case of former Maryland governor and uncle having a blast at the wedding photo booth. Larry Hogan. Hogan did his part in the ongoing mystery by posting this video on Twitter saying, I personally witnessed and videoed would appear to be dozens of large drones in the sky above my residence. Problem is, his post got a community note that said no anomalous objects are apparent in the video, and the stars at the 39-second mark are recognizably the constellation Orion. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough, but that was not Hogan's only sighting. He later posted, "Oh my God, there's a giant ladle coming for me." And a smaller ladle too, like pouring into the bigger one. But it's going to take more than community notes to calm things down. One New Jersey politician proposed a bill to give local law enforcement the same type of capability as the Department of Defense and Homeland Security, permission to down one of these unmanned drones. He wants local police to shoot at anything in the sky in December. Santa, I hope you have a Kevlar sleigh. And don't forget to take the battery out of Rudolph's nose. We will have more on this story as we continue to learn nothing about it.
All right, there you go. Last night on the CBS Late Show. That is what I've got for you on today's opening segment here. Your good stuff, your news, and clips. And now it's time to get to the interviews. And coming up, my conversation with Jared Yates Sexton, who I talked to yesterday live on YouTube. But first, I've got my conversation with Brian Shapiro, who is the host of the Pushing Limits show. He's got a really big following on YouTube and elsewhere, pushinglimits.live. He's gone viral for taking on all these different MAGA callers who call his show. It's really interesting. He's a great guy. He's a smart guy. He's a funny guy. He's interviewed all kinds of different people throughout the years, and I was happy to join him yesterday, and we started talking right after news of this shooting occurred, and I thought I did a good enough job that I would share with you here. So here's my conversation with Brian Shapiro, pushingthelimits.live. You can find him on YouTube anytime and subscribe to his show there, support him there. Let's do it right now, and then after that, we'll go to my conversation with Jared Yates Sexton.
Pretty much on a daily basis. I mean, Nancy Mace has tweeted out thousands, and she did it again today. But nothing about another school shooting. And if they do decide to tweet something, it'll be thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers. And they'll continue to talk about banning books. They'll continue to talk about transgender surgery and trans people in bathrooms, you know, the two-tier justice system, so on and so forth. But when it comes to gun control and these young children, not just those who lost their lives today, but what about the children that were running for their lives today that'll be traumatized for the rest of their life? But people like Ted Cruz and others will say, we need to harden our schools. J.D. Vance, yeah, our windows need to be stronger. That's their answer to a real problem like all the gun violence in this country. So to talk about this horrible tragedy, and, you know, I wanted this guy to come on this show because I love having him on. I think he's great. And I didn't think that we'd have to talk about another school shooting. It's so tragic. But joining us right now on the show, he is Pete Dominick. You've seen him on CNN and MSNBC. Very funny stand-up comedian. And he also has two daughters, so I'm sure this hits home for him. And I wanted to get his take on this, and it's a pleasure to have him on. Pete, thank you so much for being here again. Good to have you. How are you, sir?
Brian, great to be back. I really appreciate you having me on your show. I've really enjoyed watching and listening to it. And yeah, it's terrible. I just saw this tweet. Breaking news. Well-regulated militia opens fire in Abundant Life Christian School in Madison, Wisconsin. Cheap thoughts and useless prayers are now being rushed to the scene. More on this soon-to-be-forgotten and then repeated story as it develops.
So true. So true, Pete. And I try not to go on X as much as I used to because it's just a cesspool, as you know, of bigotry and hatred. But I see some of these people on the right saying, oh, I bet it was a trans shooter. And it's just despicable comments. And there are parents, unfortunately, there are going to be some kids that aren't going to be going home today. And instead of talking about, hey, we need to do something to fix this problem, attacking the trans community and saying, oh, Democrats are going to make this political.
There can be any number of reasons why any of us get really upset, very emotional, become, in some extreme cases, homicidal or suicidal. It happens all over the country all the time. But most people don't necessarily have access to a gun right now. If you want to, you can. But the question isn't to talk about mental health or why they did this. We can get to that, and we should. We always will. I mean, if we had some kind of motive right now, as we quickly got with Luigi Mangione, we pretty much understand why he did what he did. He wrote a goddamn
damn manifesto. But no, the issue is access to guns. That's the issue. So if you want to score political points and say this person had these beliefs and was radicalized by this guy or that philosophy, fine. But it's the access to guns. So if they're a far left-wing radical or a far right-wing white supremacist, it's all one common thread. It's only in America, only in America. It's the access to guns and the bullets. And I've been working on this issue for years with every single major local organization, all the way from the top to the bottom, on the issue of gun violence. It's a huge issue, and these stories get so much attention. And the last point I would make is right now on TV, as we're talking, it happened just, a couple of hours ago. But like MSNBC is now on their third law enforcement expert that they invited on to speculate about another nightmare school shooting. But none of the experts have any inside information, Brian. I mean, there's an argument that this type of coverage is part of the problem. It perpetuates this kind of violence. And, no matter what happens, it's like you bring on an expert. A plane crashes. I used to do this joke in my stand-up act, and then they just bring some guy on who doesn't know any more than you or I. It's like, why? Do we know why it crashed? No, I don't know. But I can tell you that this plane was the kind with wings and 2 jet engines, and I've flown this before, and it's, usually it handles pretty well. I'm not quite sure what happened. Yeah, nobody knows what happened. Get off the air. Update us when you do.
Right. You're right. It's all speculation, right? I just was listening to Andrew McCabe. Nice guy, right? But he doesn't know why this happened or who the shooter is or motive or anything.
It's always the law enforcement people, because it's why are we inviting all the law enforcement people? Invite the anti-gun violence people on right away. Invite Moms Demand on right away. Invite Chris Brown at Brady. Invite Shannon Watts at Demand. Invite David Hogg. Invite all of these young activists to come on and talk about gun violence. It's the gun violence. Kid didn't walk in with a knife. It's a gun. It doesn't happen in other countries because they don't have access to guns. And these stupid solutions, like you mentioned earlier, Ted Cruz. How dumb do you have to be? First of all, the shooter, as Dave Chappelle famously or infamously told in a stand-up bit, he's in the shooting drills. He's in this case, a student at the school. He knows what protections they're taking. So you can up-armor your school all you want. You know what I would do, Brian? I would wait in the parking lot with my assault rifle. So what are you going to do then? Put a dome over the parking lot and a security gate to get in there? It's preposterous, these notions. It's access to guns, period.
You are so right. And I'm a personal friend. Fred Gutenberg is such a great guy.
Great guy, yeah.
And,
I know Fred, yeah.
I have him on this show all the time. And sadly, usually it's after a school shooting. He lost his daughter in Parkland. You're so right about that. You want to hear from those kinds of people because they know what it's like, sadly, to lose somebody in a school shooting, to lose your child. And yet, when you hear, the Greg Abbotts of the world and others after a mass shooting like this one, I think it was after the Walmart shooting in Texas, El Paso, where he said, well, now's not the time to talk about gun control. Let's not talk about gun control right now. Why is it, Pete, that when you hear these Republicans that are running for office, in almost all of their campaign commercials, they're bragging about their A-plus rating from the NRA. But yet I've never seen or heard of a Democrat bragging about their A-plus rating from the NRA. It's always the Republicans that are bragging about their NRA rating. Yeah. It appears to me that what they care about is remaining in power, getting the money from the NRA, and they put that and prioritize that ahead of our public safety.
Well, I understand this issue all too intimately. I've been covering it for years. I've talked to all sides of it. I've moderated debates on it and so on. And, there's a lot of ways to talk about it. First of all, I think that it's not necessarily because of the NRA money anymore. As a matter of fact, the NRA is bankrupt and on its way out. There are plenty of other organizations, but the movement itself is very powerful. The pro-gun movement. I don't have to tell you or anybody listening how powerful this movement is. So Republicans really have to be beholden to the ideology of anybody can have guns, all the time, as much as you want, unregulated gun industry, gun buying. They have to be beholden to that far end of the spectrum or they'll get primaried. So it's less about the money. And the money comes in from individual donors when you hold that kind of view and send out your Christmas card with you and your family members holding AR-15s. These people, including you mentioned Governor Abbott, he is a particularly vile, insidious creature on this issue. He once tweeted, Brian, go look it up. Everybody should. He put out a tweet years ago that basically shamed Texan residents for who did not buy guns. He said you should, something about the effect of you should be embarrassed if you're not a gun owner. And the most important part of this issue is the lie that's been told to a generation of Americans now, which is that the Second Amendment has always said that you have a right to a personal firearm. I've been covering this issue with constitutional law scholars for over a decade. That's not what the Second Amendment said, and it's not what the Supreme Court held forever until the 80s, until the rise of the NRA, and it did become a huge lobbying effort because obviously they got to make more and more guns. But let's be clear, this was not the interpretation of the Second Amendment for the vast majority of American history. And, don't ask me, ask the right-wing former chairman of the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice, who said it's absurd to think that that's the interpretation of it. And I could find you that quote. But I mean, this is something that's been hijacked, this entire movement, this interpretation of the Second Amendment. It's not what it says. I most infamously got in a huge argument with Joe Rogan on his show about this. And I could just tell you, it's obviously one of the biggest shows in the world. That was November 19. It was pretty big then. And I heard from listeners for months, still do every once in a while, that are telling me to kill myself because of my correct view of the history on guns, much less my personal opinion. So it's obviously a really powerful, animating issue and will continue to be no matter how many kids get killed and no matter what the name of the school is. And it does.
Yeah. You're right. If you're just joining us, he is Pete Dominick, CNN contributor. Wanted to talk about some other issues with you, and we'll get to that. But let's talk about solutions, Pete, to gun control. I talk about these issues all the time. Sadly, it's usually after another mass shooting. I've said I believe the age should be 18 to 21. I believe that we should have mandatory training. Just like you need to be trained to drive a car, you should be trained on how to use a weapon and store it properly, so on and so forth. I also believe that there should be the assault weapons ban that fizzled out in the early 90s. Republicans allowed it to fizzle out. I also think that should be implemented. Red flag laws that work, that need to be consistent state to state. I've always believed in that as well. And I also believe that if you sell a gun illegally to somebody, it should be a mandatory prison sentence. Now, I don't expect all those things to be done. Give me a couple. Give me 2 out of those 5. And if the argument is, well, why would you raise the age 18 to 21 when you could be 18 and serve in the military? Yeah, but they're trained how to use the weapons. If you're in the military, they train you. An 18-year-old today, for the most part, just like the Uvalde, Texas shooting, the day he turns 18 could walk right into a gun store with zero training. And, 80% of the country believe in comprehensive background checks. Why can't we get this on the books? I mean, just give me 2 out of those, and I believe it'll save lives, Pete.
Yeah, you mentioned just a couple of reforms that would certainly be effective, but if you go to BradyUnited.org, they have a whole bunch of others, including many that you didn't mention. When we think about these shootings, we sensationalize them because obviously when it's more than a few people, God, it's horrible at a grocery store or in a place of sanctuary, a synagogue or a church. But man, if it's kids in a school, there's nothing worse than that, obviously. But the bottom line is most gun violence that takes lives is homicide and suicide. That's by far the most, and even accidental death. And so one of the major reforms that could be, instituted is locks. Putting smart locks, which are highly available and effective, on your guns. So God forbid your teenage kid doesn't find your gun and more than likely take their own life than take the lives of their friends, their siblings by accident, or kids in school. So there's so many more ideas and laws that we could change. You mentioned a few, but smart locks, why can't we do that? Inspire parents to lock up their guns at home. 4.6 million children live in homes with an unsecured firearm, Brian. I mean, if you're a gun-owning parent, you have to take responsibility for your gun.
Sandy Hook, what you're talking about, Sandy Hook. Unfortunately, the mother, it cost her life, but she had a mentally deranged son, and somehow he couldn't even interact with other people. He was, had so many issues, and yet she taught him how to use a gun and gave him access to guns. It cost her own life and all those innocent children in Sandy Hook. Yeah. So many other things, Pete, to talk about. Obviously, this is breaking news. We're going to learn a little bit more information, I would hope, in the coming hours and days, weeks and months of how and why this happened. But I wanted to get your take on this because over the weekend I'm seeing images of Daniel Penny, who was invited by Donald Trump to the Army-Navy football game. And I say to myself, and I posted this on social media today, Pete, why is it that the Republican Party, if you're the McCloskeys, a white couple, pointing your weapons at Black Lives Matter protesters, even though they're not on your private property, you become a star within the Republican Party. You speak at the RNC convention. Why is it that a guy like a Kyle Rittenhouse becomes a hero? He's paid by Turning Point to make speeches at some college universities. When Kyle Rittenhouse, fine, he wasn't convicted, but he's still a moron. He should have never been there to begin with in Kenosha. And now Daniel Penny. Somehow, whether he's guilty or not guilty, I know he was found not guilty. If you put a black man in a chokehold and keep him in a chokehold after he's unconscious, somehow you're a hero. And I asked this question because Jordan Williams killed a black man. He's black. He killed a black man in New York City. It was self-defense. Why isn't Donald Trump inviting him to football games? I just feel like the answer is pretty simple. And I feel like in this country, at times, if you're white and you do something to somebody black, the Republican National Convention will have you speak at their convention and you're some sort of hero, Pete.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been the case for years now. I mean, you can go back to George Zimmerman, who murdered Trayvon Martin, who was minding his own business, walking home. And you can talk about Michael Brown in Ferguson, who was killed by a police officer. And whether or not it was, quote, some kind of vigilante justice or not, it's just too often that when white people kill black people, that it looks exactly like that. And people cheer it on and they celebrate it. And that is the order of things and the way that it should be. I mean, there's just no doubt about the racial, not undertones, but overtones of all of these different examples. But even if you wanted to, agree with the jury in the case of what happened to Jordan Neely with this guy, Daniel Penny, even if you wanted to agree with that, you don't celebrate it. You don't act like he's a hero. You don't put him up on a pedestal like that. He murdered somebody. And that's the case with many of these issues. And they elevate them and they put them. And I think more than anything, that's the sad part of this, is because there are a certain frighteningly large percentage of Americans who can see people like this and want to revere them and want to respect them. And, this Kyle Rittenhouse, that kid is the saddest sack of an American story I've ever seen. He's always been. And it's just a pathetic situation. And they blew him all the way up. And then in many cases, he's deflated. I mean, what a sad life to be known for that your entire life. It's a terrible illustration of who we are. But let's be clear, it is who we are in terms of a large percentage of people who see that. But make no mistake, black folks and others see this for exactly what it seems to be.
No question about it. And I'm going to continue to point this out. I don't believe Daniel Penny is a hero. I don't believe Kyle Rittenhouse is a hero. I think he's an idiot. And the McCloskeys should have been convicted of crimes as well.
I have a chip on my shoulder about this too, because I did a heroic thing, right? Yeah. On a plane once, a guy went crazy, and I and other passengers restrained him. And the news press never got a hold of it. And I got no credit for it at all. I saved a plane from a mentally ill man who was becoming violent against people. I took my belt off and I tied his ankles in a chair. The guy ripped my shirt off. I was like John McClane in Die Hard. And not one news camera, nothing. That's why on shows like yours, I like to just put it out there. What about me? Where's my trophy? You know what they sent me? The airline, after the fact, sent me, a bald man, a hair care travel kit. Oh, thanks. Thank you. I
wouldn't have much. I wouldn't have much use for that either.
There were no racial undertones. This is a big man. I and others took him down. Nothing. Yippee-ki-yay.
Well, yippee-ki-yay. I was just watching Die Hard yesterday. Right. Shoot the Glass. One of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, no credit. Not even from you. Even after telling you that, you just move on to a movie. You don't say, wow, you are heroic and there should be a statue of you built on that airline's gate.
Pete, I put Scott Jennings as my number one hero. You're number two. Is that okay?
That's fine. I'll take it.
All right, fair enough. All right. So I had to bring this up because ABC paid off Donald Trump a whopping $15 million because George Stephanopoulos called Donald Trump a rapist, which I find very interesting because, Pete, I want to get your thoughts on this. Donald Trump is found liable of sexual abuse. The judge in the case characterized it as a rape. Now, I'm just going by what the judge said. Are you surprised that ABC decided to pay off this settlement of $15 million?
Yeah. I don't understand why they did this. I mean, they paid $15 million to Trump for saying exactly what the judge in the E. Jean Carroll case said. It's a stunning capitulation. I'm surprised that George Stephanopoulos went along with it. I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised to see him resign, but I guess he needs to get his $20 million a year keep coming or whatever he gets there. But yeah, ABC really screwed up. They caved on this. I can't imagine why they did it. ABC was never going to lose this defamation lawsuit to Trump. They agreed to pay $15 million probably because it's good for business. So, I mean, I would say that we just have to make sure that we don't let the oligarchs continue to gaslight us. This is fascist. It's fascism. And we're seeing it unfold right before us. And anybody who capitulates or pays him off or pays his demands, I must be missing something. But Mark Elias, who is one of the heroic lawyers, even more heroic than what I did on that airplane that day, right? He said, knee bent, ring kissed. Another legacy news outlet chooses obedience. A reminder that this is what we're doing. This is where we're at. You can't obey. You have to be unapologetically pro-democracy until your microphone and your camera turns off. I mean, what are we supposed to do? Give in? Cave in? I see these people capitulating left and right, and it's sad, but it further stiffens my spine. I'll tell you that.
It's incredible, Pete, because after Donald Trump was found liable for sexual abuse in the E. Jean Carroll case, if you remember, he did that CNN town hall with Caitlin Collins. God bless her. That was a difficult one to watch.
Yeah, she did.
And he defamed E. Jean Carroll, and he was sued for defamation after he was already found liable. And when you have a judge, now listen, we can get into the weeds on what exactly sexual abuse is. It is my personal opinion that if any type of sexual abuse is rape, that's my personal opinion of it. And when the judge characterizes it as rape, I don't think George Stephanopoulos said anything wrong. And I find it also interesting that he's interviewing Nancy Mace, the disgrace, as I call her, who cares more about trans issues and plays the victim all the time and has tweeted about trans issues thousands of times, it seems like, in the last month. And he's asking her a very fair question. If you're a woman, by the way, I don't know if Nancy Mace is telling the truth or not, by the way. I would question her on anything because apparently if you shake her hand, you broke her arm. I don't know what you make of that story.
She says she's a victim of rape. I mean, I'll believe her. But what you're about to say is the more important point, that, you know, you're a victim. I mean, I think you're going to make that point, that if you're the victim of sexual assault or rape and then you're supporting someone who's perpetuated sexual assault and or rape, allegedly dozens of times, which should surprise zero people who knew Donald Trump in 2002 would be surprised by that, which is why when I was on The Apprentice in 2004 and had the opportunity to meet him, they hired me to host a benefit. I was just doing stand-up comedy, and I hosted a lot of things, so they hired me. I was on the show. They filmed it as part of the show. And they said, do you want to meet Donald Trump? He's going to be here soon. And I said, does he want to meet us? And they said, not necessarily, but we can arrange for a meeting. I'm like, I'm good. I just want to do the show, because I knew then in 2004, Brian, that this guy was a rapist. I knew it then. So it's not like it's news. We all know it. And the idea that someone or anybody supports him, just knowing that alone has always been, to me, the most disgusting. Just you can't really keep your name credible if you are an in-the-know person. You know that he's done these horrible things to women, and yet you still support him for, mayor, much less president of the United States. It is disgusting. Any other job, any man who had been accused of these things, and you know the men are doing it. Come on. I mean, when you do it this many times, and you're rich, and you admit it, and you say, I can get away with it when I'm famous, this man shouldn't be anywhere near any type of organization, public or private, period, end of story.
Yeah, I agree. Also important to note that Donald Trump's own ex-wife, who passed away a few years ago, once accused Donald Trump of rape in a deposition. Yes, and then Donald Trump paid her off to keep her quiet. Yep. Very similar to a Pete Hegseth. very similar to Bill O'Reilly and Fox News. It's very interesting, isn't it? Let's just pay them off and keep them quiet and throw millions of dollars at people.
Roger Ailes created Donald Trump in a way, and he created O'Reilly, and he created and gave sanctuary and protection to predator men to come work for me because I'm a disgusting man who has women come into my office and twirl, do a spin, so I can see them before I hire them. That's Roger Ailes. He was a disgusting animal pig of a man, and he created that atmosphere at Fox News. And we know that obviously there's plenty of people who can create those atmospheres at small businesses and large corporations. But let's be clear. It's almost seemingly like the cost of doing business, the cover charge to get a job in the Trump White House. It's like, hey, have you assaulted any women in the past? No? Well, then we're not hiring. Yes? Oh, here's a cabinet job.
It's crazy. It's almost like a prerequisite at Fox News that you have to be accused of sexually assaulting somebody to get a gig over there. It's crazy. Pete, I love what you do, man. I really do. Love your podcast. If you want to share that information out so people can follow you, watch your podcast, which I still have to appear on, by the way. I haven't been on your show yet.
Yeah, so let's do it any day this week you want.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool,
I don't know how early.
That information, how people can find you.
I'm trying to learn to be a big YouTube star like you. So because of you, I'm inspired. YouTube.com/Stand Up with Pete. And it's a podcast every day, wherever you get your podcast, Stand Up with Pete Dominick. We've got an amazing community of people, and we hang out at 8 p.m. East every Monday and Thursday. It's probably the best thing to kind of promote and market in my way, because I love this community of people. We get like tons of people, over 50, 60, 70 people on a Zoom, and I do, comedy, and we bust each other's chops, and we have this great community that I welcome anybody who's viewing this to come check us out. And let's have you on this week. Any day that works for you works for me. I'd love it.
Love it, Pete. Love it, man. You're one of the best in the business. Super talented, and I always appreciate it when you take the time. Look forward to doing your show, and have a great rest of your day, my friend.
Thanks, man.
And appreciate the time. Thanks, Pete.
For having me, Brian.
Good to see
appreciate you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thanks, Pete.
All right, there you go. That's Brian Shapiro and me yesterday on Pushing the Limits, pushingthelimits.live. Go check it out. Subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/PTL Radio Show, by the way. And now, time to get to my conversation with Jared Yates Sexton. Of course, he is an author, and he's got a great Substack, which you should subscribe to, Dispatches from a Collapsing State. JaredYatesSexton.substack.com. And of course, you can listen to him and Nick Halselman on the Muckrake podcast. They've created a great show and community over there. Get all his books. Follow him on social media. He's a political analyst, an author, a creative writing professor, the co-host of the Muckrake podcast, and so much more. Always happy when it joins me. And yesterday we went live and made a bit about it at the beginning. My good friend, yours as well. It's time for Jared Yates Sexton, everybody. Yeah, we're live. You do this all the time. You go YouTube Live. You're like the YouTube Live veteran. Jared Yates Sexton, welcome. I feel very honored and privileged to have you here live.
Are we live? I don't know if we've
live.
Wait, we're live right now? The people can see?
Don't you do this like Win Bourbon Night? Didn't you?
Yeah,
don't you do this regularly? Yeah.
I do. I just like the hype of it. We're live right now. Anything could happen, Pete.
Well, I like to raise the stakes, and I want my guests to be really nervous about going on such a high-profile program.
I'm on the hot seat. Oh, let's both.
I said high-profile program while I held up my 11th hour with Stephanie Ruhlkup. I did not mean that, but it seems like I did, and I'll stand by it, I guess.
I love it. Anything could happen right now. We could both drink coffee. We could both talk about the advantages of going live. Literally anything, Pete.
Well, anything could happen, but I like to ask my guests questions about the things that they are paying close attention to, in your case, talking and writing about. But I will give you the opening, because we're live.
We're live?
To answer the first question about anything, about life, about suffering, about finding joy, about anything you want, nature. Ask me something, or tell me what you want to share with the folks, because I have a few specific questions for you.
Sure. Actually you touched on a few of them. I was talking to you before we went live. I feel like this is obviously a very strange moment. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger. I feel very clear right now. I feel very motivated. I feel very focused. And you know what's funny about it, Pete? You actually brought up nature. That's one of the things about it is like, I feel like this is a moment of great danger and great importance. But man, has it really made the good things and the replenishing things that much more important. I've been going out in nature a lot more. I'm actually getting ready to go to a cabin for an extended period of time to shut down.
Up, baby. Very good. For an extended period of time. Look at you.
For an extended period of time. That's what we call in the business self-care. And so
self-care. Look at this.
So I'm very focused on where I'm at and what I'm doing. And I think you have to be able to hold a couple of things in mind at once, which is the seriousness of the moment and also the things that bring you pleasure and joy and basically are self-care. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's great, man. I'm doing the same thing. And I think a lot of people are. I think that's what we're doing during the lame duck session, during the time between the election and the inauguration, during the time between the holidays, Thanksgiving, Taint Week, which is the week between Christmas and New Year's where nothing happens. Sorry.
I've never heard it referred to, but we are live. So, I mean, like any reaction to that is
the thing I've been saying every year on my show for years and years. I try to be live on those days for people.
How is Target not advertising that? How are there not taint sales? Make that happen.
They'll lower their standards in Trump too, because, you know, corporate standards are just going to go lower and lower in terms of who they hire and how they market. Like, are there still going to be family values at those stores where they're not going to sell certain books with gay characters or sex in them? No, I mean, it's all going to be kind of patriarchal, I would imagine, if anything. But otherwise,
you're going to see. And you know what's funny about that? Like, speaking of it, like the capitulation that's already taking place before the second Trump administration.
Yeah, we should name who and which entities. We should keep a list of who's capitulated. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it would be easier right now to talk about who hasn't capitulated. But, you know, you brought up Target, and it's actually interesting to talk about that, Pete, because we need to point out how many corporations have just absolutely used progressivism and tolerance and diversity as sort of a selling point. They didn't really care about any of this. Of course, we saw Target start to back away from sort of queer marketing and LGBTQ marketing. But like also, you know, there was a period. I don't, do you go to Target? Have you ever actually stepped foot
to Target? Often I do. There's one near me, and their berries and groceries are cheaper, much cheaper. And so I try to go to the local, but sometimes I go there for certain things. So the point is, yes, I go there often, I would say.
I'm sure you noticed this, and probably your listeners did as well.
I'm a Red Circle member.
Oh, you get the rewards.
I'm just saying.
I pressed skip on that, but that's neither here nor there. But like when you go into Target and you would even see the advertisements, like you would see like plus size models, you would see diverse models, you would see like LGBTQ models. That type of stuff is going to go away because a large part of it, of course, was marketing. But the capitulation is both going to be out in the open with people like John Fetterman and Sidney Blumenthal and all of these. But the corporations that have been doing this for a while, it's going to become readily apparent who is getting on board with this and who is going to go ahead and back off because of what's happening.
So everybody is referring to Timothy Snyder, but he's not the only person who is an expert on autocracy and authoritarianism. Of course, you've written a lot about it, but just talk about your view of what we're hearing, which is what is it referred to, that capitulation, the kissing of the ring, the bending of the knee. It's being called different things, but why is that a bad thing? What does history say about those individuals who do it and those companies and corporations who do it as well?
Well, I want to introduce everybody listening to a term that they need to become familiar with, which is Quisling. And that is a group of people who are more than happy to work with authoritarians as things start to move. One of the problems, and this is what I've been screaming about for years now, was that everybody wanted to say Trump was an aberration and like he was going to get rejected. We were going to move on. The Overton window of this country has moved towards the right. The 2024 election proved that in a variety of ways. And one of the things I don't think people were able to wrap their heads around is that basically from 2016 up to 2024, there was a period of time in which there was a lot of money to be made by making these gestures of quote unquote resistance. And, you know, I wasn't shocked that one of the first people to do this was Joe Scarborough. And of course, we've seen from the New York Times, we've seen from the Washington Post. Don't forget, people, democracy dies in the darkness. all of this stuff was a gesture towards a demographic marketing, which was the idea that you could get a bunch of people who oppose Donald Trump to pay money for products that then sort of communicated that resistance. But it wasn't real. It was basically making people feel better and like they were spending their money on something that was going to somehow or another make things different. Meanwhile, our culture and our politics continue to move towards the right. And what's happening now is we're seeing within the Democratic Party, within liberal spheres, and history shows us this is what happens. The white middle class always gets caught between these things, and most often they will end up moving towards the right, especially as their own positions start to get more and more precarious.
Well, all very interesting, well explained. Quisling, by the way, I looked that up. It's named after Vidkun Quisling, the former Minister of Defense of Norway. He was a Nazi collaborator who nominally headed the government of Norway during the country's occupation by Nazi Germany. Quisling, a traitor who collaborates with an enemy force occupying their country. You mentioned the Overton window moved to the right. Let me challenge you on that because, of course, I think there's an easy way to say that it did and a way that you could be right saying that. But the way I look at it, I look at how American public opinion is on a wide range of issues. And when they're polled and when they're asked and when those ideas, solutions, and other things are explained, people overwhelmingly agree with democratic ideas, progressive ideas, as well as what progressives and liberal Democrats think of the role of government. So overwhelmingly Americans think this about pro-choice, about abortion, and want rules on guns and have feelings about the Supreme Court and voting. Overwhelmingly, when you're explained, when it's not tagged to one party or the other, people come down on progressive ideas and a general feeling of, I don't know if you'd say positiveness, but about the role of government, what it's supposed to do, like recently provide health care for the American people. So while the Overton window seems to have switched in terms of the way people voted, when it comes to how I try to just muddle through explaining how Americans actually feel on issues, aren't we still more likely to side with Democrat, progressive, liberal ideas and issues and laws?
It depends. It gets a little weird here. So, for instance, I think polling, man, you can use polling to prove whatever you want at any given moment. And I think that America is largely in favor of what you would say are democratic appeals or principles. But there are other things that have happened too. So, for instance, like the way that polling changed, whether it was on immigration, which, I mean, in 2024, one of the main arguments was who is going to be tougher on immigration, which should blow people's hair back, that is where it ended up happening.
The hair jokes.
Well, you and I as follically challenged men, I think it's okay.
Blows your beard back to hear that. The immigration issue, of course, which frustrates the hell out of me, simply because the solution for that is comprehensive immigration reform, which is a raft of laws that would do a wide range of things. And Republicans and Democrats have agreed on that and tried to pass it many times. But either a Republican-led House or a former president stops those laws from happening. That's what you need to fix immigration. Democrats have wanted to do that. They've tried to do that. Republicans won't let them do that because they want to keep it an issue. Rant is over.
Yeah, that's what happens whenever you meet on the rhetorical battlefield of the Republican Party's choosing. And quite frankly, like what you're talking about is a feedback loop that we've seen. So, for instance, the New York Times is a permission structure generator. So, for instance, what did we hear on gay and trans things for forever? Right? The right liberal position was, yeah, we should have tolerance, but maybe they're going too far. You know, the quote unquote left, which doesn't exist in the United States of America, they're just as dangerous as MAGA. So basically what happens is that middle, that moderate, starts to move further and further to the right, particularly as market conditions necessitate. So yes, people are going to say, I agree with this and I support this. But if there's not a robust agenda or a push to get those things done that also goes ahead and pairs with the economic conditions that everybody exists within, which are not good. It doesn't matter how good you say the quote unquote economy is. It's not. The actual existence within the United States and around liberal democracies that are crumbling right now, it's getting worse. So what happens is you have a group of people, and I got a lot of flack for this for years. I started to notice in conversations with liberals, and I started to notice in the way things were being framed, that things were moving towards the right. And, you know, people didn't want to sit with that because there were a lot of gestures and a lot of talking about what people thought about, but there wasn't fighting for it. That was the issue. So what has effectively happened is that the United States of America has entered a pseudo environment in which people say, yeah, I want all of those things. But meanwhile, they're becoming more and more comfortable with authoritarianism and Trumpism, which we're seeing right now. It's a very weird, bewildering time, but it makes sense when you actually look at the bigger picture.
I think you said the left doesn't exist in America. Did I hear you right?
Yes, that's correct.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there are people. So, for instance, I'm a proud leftist, but I don't have any representation in government. Basically, what we have within the United States in the political paradigm is a center left to far right paradigm. And basically, since World War II, and this we don't have enough time to get into it, the left, whether it's labor unions or people with social democratic ideals or whatever, they were hunted down, they were killed, they were neutralized and marginalized. So when you actually take a look at political conversations, they never touch on this stuff. You never get the solutions that the left would give you. They're considered dangerous or extreme, and they're never given any type of actual traction. So what we've actually found, Pete, and you talked about those polls and what people believe, the majority of people want this stuff. It just so happens it's never expressed whatsoever in our political paradigm. And so then it comes down to cultural issues, which are created by the wealth class in order to divide us and keep us from actually voting on the things that we actually want.
I hear you when you say the left doesn't exist. What you mean is it doesn't represent you in government. There aren't elected representatives who you feel that you identify with their politics. So what would you say to those who are considered furthest to the left in, say, the House or the Senate, the furthest progressive? What would you say is the daylight or difference between your views as a leftist, which I identify as well, but I mean, I'm not sure. I want things like this confuse people. So what's the difference between you as a leftist and the person in the House furthest to the left or the Senate?
Well, so for instance, I think one of the main drivers of why we're in the situation we are now is because going back to the late 1970s, early 1980s, there has been a consensus in politics called neoliberalism, which of course divides people because it's got the word liberal in it. But basically what happened was that tens of trillions of dollars were redistributed from the working and middle classes to the 1% of the population. History tells us when that happens, including in the United States, that the country becomes more and more anti-democratic. Corruption is everywhere. So instead of talking about fixing that and actually redistributing that wealth and reviving democracy, small d democracy, we have conversations that are about nibbling on the sides because the so-called left or center left is considered dangerous. So Bernie Sanders, for instance, who is a center left politician, right? All of a sudden, the things that he talks about, or even Elizabeth Warren talks about, like she is emerging as like one of the leaders of the progressive caucus within the Democratic Party. Those things are seen as too dangerous. So it ends up becoming a debate between the far right and the moderates.
Right.
So then if we're talking about programs, Pete, we're talking about, margin testing. We're talking about, well, this group can do this or this group can do that and you can do this or you can do that. But it's all about moderating that idea. So basically, that concentrated leftism that people are actually desperate for, which the Republican Party has taken advantage of. Josh Hawley, J.D. Vance, and even Donald Trump are putting out leftist ideas that they don't believe in order to capture some of the energy we're talking about. So effectively, it changes the way our politics works and puts us on like a real path to failure.
What are the ideas that they are supporting that have been historically supported by leftists or would be now?
Well, I mean, listen, I'm not going to recommend that people go listen to speeches by J.D. Vance or Josh Hawley. My God. But basically, they are giving the way that it works is that they give the actual diagnosis of what has happened. So if you listen to Hawley or you listen to Vance or even your old buddy Steve Bannon, your old stablemate, basically what they say is that the wealthy in this country have rigged things in their favor, which has hurt everybody else. And that we need a reinvigoration of everything from manufacturing to, a government that actually helps the people. The problem, and we've seen this with everything from fascism to earlier authoritarian movements, is that the far right recognizes that there is a vacuum there, that people are not being spoken to and they're not being given solutions that actually address their problems. So they do it in, how do I say this in a charitable way? A less than honest solution, right? Which is that J.D. Vance, Josh Hawley, Donald Trump are controlled by the wealth class who created this problem in the first place. And what they do is that they take that anger and they redirect it from the wealth class to people of color, women, the poor, labor unions, all the people that they oppose, and they redirect that anger and then use it for their own purposes.
Well, you said it one way. I say it a little bit differently. I know exactly what you're saying now, which is they identify a problem, in this case, wealth concentration at the top, but the solution for it is an insidious, corrupt, maybe racist, maybe it's a wrong solution. They blame the wrong causes. They look at the problem, wealth concentration, and then they blame all the wrong issues. Instead of the deregulation of the financial industry, they blamed poor black people buying homes they couldn't afford.
Right. Immigrants buying homes, which is one of the wildest assertions. Yeah.
So, okay. Let me get back to where we're at now, though. I mean, by the way, did you answer? I feel like you didn't. What's the difference between you and, say, Bernie Sanders? I've been paying a lot of attention to his policies and his comments lately. And I just think the thing about Bernie that people both are annoyed by and that is both effective is he's been saying a lot of the same things over and over and over again, to the point where you see him on, say, Meet the Press yesterday. I was surprised by his reaction to the drones, which was hilarious. I don't know if you saw it, which was I don't know. I don't care. I guess I'm worried. But he went off on, billionaires and millionaires and all of that. And so I feel like he's really effective. I don't disagree with him on most policy ideas. What about you?
Well, okay. So I don't know how much time we have, but I think this is actually an important topic. So here's what I want to say, Pete, which is I think that Bernie Sanders is right on a lot of issues, but he's also been in Congress for so long that he has become an institutionalist. He attempted twice to win the nomination of the Democratic Party. Whether you can argue whether or not he had the votes to do so, whether or not he could have won the presidency. You can also point out that the Democratic Party as an institution didn't want it, and that they closed ranks and kept him from being able to do it.
Yep.
Okay. So on top of that, Bernie Sanders has missed a lot of what actually needs to happen. And if this needs to be my closing remark, and in terms of where my focus is and where my energy is, we cannot rely on this political class or media class to save us. We have been told that don't worry, they've got it taken care of. The lawsuits are going to take care of it. The next election is going to take care of it. You name it. The concentration of wealth has led to a corruption of representative democracy in the United States of America. What has to happen now is that individuals are going to have to form their own coalitions to put pressure on the political process and start to push back against this stuff. Bernie Sanders has talked about doing it within the halls of power. He's been effectively quarantined and made unable to do that, and it doesn't seem like he's particularly interested in forming those coalitions. When it comes to what we actually need to do, we need to look back to the progressive era. We need to look back to the civil rights era, the social revolutions of feminism, gay rights, you name it. The problem is that we as individuals are going to have to do the work. We're going to have to form with other people. We're going to have to engage in solidarity, and we're going to have to put pressure on the system from the outside.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. It's a hard road. It isn't easy, but it's kind of fun. Engaging in solidarity is fun. I've created this amazing community of people, and it's my favorite thing in the world. And we've come together in this time that you and I have been discussing and trying to just support each other while we support different ideas and politicians and solutions, talk about it all. It's great. Solidarity can be fun.
At the risk of being too sentimental, some of the things that have given me the most pleasure has been engaging, for instance, with your community, the Muckrake community, which we formed, me and Nick Hauselman. Like, I want to point out that in these times of darkness, and I'm sure you've seen it, a lot of people have given over denialism and doomerism. There's nothing to do. I'm done with it. There's a reason why MSNBC and CNN's ratings have absolutely plummeted, which is the spectatorship of politics in the United States of America. We've been sold a bunch of lies by a bunch of quote unquote resistance grifters. The truth is, when you meet other people and you see them as human beings and you form a core with them, not only do you find the replenishment and the energy that you need, but you actually start to form things that can get things done, which is not relying on people to take care of things for you anymore. You're taking care of them. The problem here is there's a lot of danger in that, Pete. And that danger is growing by the day, and it will get even worse under a second Trump administration. But it's the only way out of this thing, is to actually form communities and engage in active solidarity.
Yes, history has taught us that the only way out is through it. Do you have time for one more?
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right. What is the white male fascist pipeline besides my new band, which is playing at CBGB's on Thursday?
Yeah, they're going to be there with the Fugazi reunion, right? So basically what has happened here, and this is one of the most misunderstood thing, and in the fallout from the 2024 election, you're hearing everybody say, we need our own Joe Rogan, or we need to start appealing to white men or whatever. What's actually happened in this country is white men are aggrieved. And part of the reason that they're aggrieved and that they've become more and more radicalized is a cultural reaction. They're pissed off that Marvel movies, Star Wars movies, entertainments have started to market to women and people of color and LGBTQ people. So they feel like something's been taken from them because they've been alienated from the political process. So in effect, because their fantasies, corporate produced fantasies, have been impinged upon, they feel as if the world is being taken out from them. This has had almost a one-to-one effect with so-called replacement theory, the idea that they're being replaced and gotten rid of by the Democratic Party, liberal elites, the deep state, whatever you want to say. So basically, at this point, because our politics have been so consumerized, what products you buy are then your politics. Right. They're having a reaction to their products changing, which has actually radicalized them. And this seems weird until you start to realize that fascist and authoritarian movements have also been reactions to things like jazz music, which in the past was supposedly a Jewish conspiracy to ruin the United States of America or Europe. And so it is basically a consumer reaction that has been capitalized on by the wealth class and the authoritarian movement we're talking about.
Who perpetuates it? Who's selling it?
Well, it's a combination of things.
I get some of this.
Well, so first of all, there's an ecosystem, and all this has it's the people at the top, and then there's like this. It's almost like MLMs, right? So you have all these influencers and personalities. YouTube is a perfect place to go look at this, and basically what you'll see is that it's a bunch of people who tell people, "Hey, you know why the new Star Wars movie didn't feel good? It's because it's woke indoctrination, and you have quote unquote woke corporations." If you remember, Marjorie Taylor Greene called it, what was it, communist corporations, which is a wild thing to say out loud. But basically, it's a misunderstanding of capitalism, as we went back to Bannon and Hawley and Vance, that then redirects the anger from what corporations and the capitalist class is doing, and then puts it on gay people, black people, trans people, women, you name it. So it's basically a big redirection and radicalization project.
Communist corporation. If
corporations.
If a movie studio like Warner Brothers made a movie that the plot was America turns from capitalism to communism successfully, and everybody loves it, everybody's happy, and there's flowers everywhere, and everybody's having sex and blueberry pie. If they made that movie and that movie made a lot of money for Warner Brothers, Marjorie Taylor Greene would still not have a point to say that these are communist corporations, because it's a private entertainment movie studio making hundreds of millions of dollars off of a movie.
Yeah. And basically
great.
What has happened?
They did it in a capitalistic way possible.
So after 2016, and I just want to put this into quick context, what happened after 2016 was very much a reaction to Donald Trump being elected president, in which you had a lot of people who wanted to feel better about their existences. So what happened? These corporations recognized a marketing opportunity. So what did they do? They started producing movies and TV shows and entertainments that reflected back what they believed were the political principles of the people buying them. They didn't care about this, and this is one of the reasons why these same – but the idea that the Walt Disney Corporation wants to promote wokeness when they are one of the main drivers of conservative ideology and myth-making in this country is a wild misunderstanding of things. It was an attempt, much like I always say Pepsi. And you and I are old enough to remember when Pepsi marketed itself as the choice of a new generation. It's sugar water, right? But it went ahead and marketed itself towards younger people to say, this is your cola. Right. It doesn't mean anything. It's a marketing opportunity. And the reaction to that has fueled a lot of the fascist right-wing momentum in this country.
Yeah. Well, now we've got what looks most like, I heard Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Chris Murphy both yesterday refer to, the incoming Trump administration as more like an oligarchy. You've got like several billionaires. And what there's a lot of things that they want to do, but we're talking about different economic systems and we're talking about different representation systems and kinds of democracy. But it's really what it is. It's going to be something that's new and original to the United States, but it has elements of current day countries and systems like Hungary and others, and systems long past failed and punishing and punitive, but it's going to be its own American kind of oligarchy is what it's going to look like, with all these billionaires with the hands on the government treasury, all the taxpayer money. They're just going to sell off America and dominate markets and tech bros. How does it look like? How do you describe what this new form of economic system and democracy is?
Well, I want to invite people because the United States, living in the United States, sort of like perverts our understanding of this because we're exceptional. Nothing could ever happen. So, Pete, I want to point something out, and I know that you've seen this. I know your listeners have as well. Imagine you pick up the newspaper and you hear about some quote unquote second or third world country. There's been an election that got held, right? And the person who got elected is a total buffoon, a tin-pot dictator figure. Everybody in America recognizes that he's under control by the corporations in that country, and when he gets in power, he's going to sell off all the resources. He's only going to become more and more of sort of a criminal. There's open corruption, all that stuff. We used to think that that was normal in other countries. Right. And we even engaged in it. The CIA engaged in like getting these people so that we could get their resources and labor. The problem is that project that the United States of America played a part in, it's come full circle. That's what we've got now. We have a president who is owned and basically controlled by billionaires like Elon Musk. And you know, I brought up Blumenthal earlier. A lot of these Democrats their strategy is to suck up to Elon Musk. Almost like going into a feudal court and hoping that a baron or a lord will take favor with what you want. So basically what we're looking at is a situation that looks almost exactly like what we expect in so-called second and third world countries. We didn't expect it to come around to us, but it always boomerangs back, and that's where we are now.
Lots more to talk about with you. You've been writing a lot of great stuff over at your Substack, Dispatches from a Collapsing State. I hope you have a good time at your cabin. Will you be taking some time off?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any time to be taken off. I think and this is actually a piece of advice I'd like to give people. You have to be very, very compartmentalized in when you do what you need to do to prepare for the next administration, to organize, but also compartmentalize that stuff, put it away when you need to take some time for yourself. So it's going to be very sort of regimented. Right. So like being able to like take time to take care of yourself. Now I'm going to do work. Now I'm going to take care of myself. Now I'm going to do work. And that is unfortunately the job that we have to do from now on.
Yeah. I want to hear more about your process. That's exactly how I kind of see it and trying to manage my life as well. You know, I bet you're going to be building fires. And when I look at you, I think you probably smell like a wood fire. I always think that's what you smell like. A wood fire.
I have worked very hard to smell like a mixture of fine woods. Mm-hmm. And fires. That is, and a little pine tar thrown in there.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think you smell like, Jared. So
listen, I'm nothing if not a caricature of my class. Like that's what I do. That's how I am. Let's roll with it.
You know, it's funny. I mentioned that. Now I remember. I did. You know, last year in Vegas at PODJAM, I did actually smell you, and it was straight Drakkar, which I was surprised by.
Oh, that must have been a remnant of my high school years where I was trying to be something that I wasn't. I'm shocked it wasn't a Hugo Boss or a Cool Water.
You were wearing a members only jacket. It was a weird. You were having.
How dare you? How dare you? This is a personal attack on me.
Just saying. That's all I remember. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm going to end the stream. I appreciate you doing this with me, buddy.
You're the best. Good talking.
All right. Go check out Jared's Substack right now, JaredYatesSexton.substack.com. Thanks, everybody, for watching it live. And, of course, I'll post it for the podcast tomorrow. End stream. All right, that's it. Jared Yates Sexton and Brian Shapiro on today's show. Your good stuff, the headlines, the clips, all of it. Sorry it's up a little late today, but hopefully you liked it, appreciated it. If you do, support me with a paid subscription. You can always upgrade your subscription, get a Christmas bonus, whatever you want to do. I am grateful to all of you and for all of it. I will talk to you tomorrow. John Carroll taking us out today. Have a good one. I love you. Goodbye.
Challenge, let the meek weak flee. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up on your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up, stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up, that's right. You got to rise up, you got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. All you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. Alright, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Oh, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up. In the darkest hour, stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand up.